to the Digital Week Online. We have a fantastic panel right now where we will evaluate how to reinvent cities and nations in a time of COVID-19. We have an opportunity to bring all the elements of these panel discussions, ideas, views, experiences together in order to think about reinventing cities and nations in a time of COVID-19. The world is still suffering from COVID-19. It cannot be that cities and nations won't reinvent themselves in order to avoid such a disaster in the future. Indeed, COVID-19 is forcing cities and nations to reinvent themselves and transform our economies and societies in a sustainable way, with a particular focus on safety and health. Earlier today, we could hear how the fourth industrial revolution could drive digital transformation of our cities and nations. Dear panelists, I invite you to explore the following areas: the healthcare solutions in the context of cities and nations, sustainability ideas, including the transplantation and the online education, technology, smart cities, IoT with control, and with the focus on COVID-19. The aspect of regulations in cities and countries. Something needs to be done. I have the pleasure to welcome today Dr. Rais Hussein, His Excellent Chairman of Malaysia INDEC, Mr. Micah Walker, Group CEO of Graba, Global Identity Verification Solutions Provider, Professor Kieran Fernandez, Professor and Associate Dean, Durham University, UK, Vice Chair, National Commission, UNESCO, Mr. Antonio Santos, Hot Leader, Ambassador, Atos, Siemens, and myself, Sebastian Ginalski, your moderator and Director at Open Business Council, the Global Business Directory, Marketplace, and Supply Chain. The question we are having today, in the time of COVID-19, could this panel please explore and recommend governance structure and policy mechanisms to ensure cities and nations have the agility and the ability to reinvent themselves and harness sustainability and health innovation that promise the greatest social, economical, and environmental returns. First, I have the pleasure to give the hand to Dr. Rais Hussein. Dr. Rais Hussein is a Navid strategist, social engineer, accountable entrepreneur, and serious policy intellectual. He is currently the president CEO of EMIR Research, which specializes in data-driven research on any given national or international issues. Dr. Rais also serves as co-chairman of Deutsche Malaysia Ventures, which he co-founded and to promote inbound investment, technology, and execution for high-tech, high-value projects in Malaysia. He also writes extensively on telecommunications technology and management in The Edge, Malaysia's leading weekly business paper. Dr. Rais Hussein adheres to a set of UN Sustainable Goals, European AI Alliance, and universal principles that guide our technological and business strategy decisions. Thanks to Dr. Rais Hussein, Malaysia is blessed with the chance to re-engineer the human experiment using technologies that decentralize authority and de-emphasize divisions along the lines of color, creed, and country. What the Japanese have coined Society 5.0 has been accepted as Malaysia 5.0. We'll show the video now.
The aspirations for the Malaysian Digital Economy Corporation, MDEC, is to firmly establish Malaysia as the hub of digital ASEAN, a regional digital powerhouse and industry trailblazer. In this role, it had launched global champions to lead the fourth industrial revolution, 4IR. This includes ensuring the digital economy will drive forward the promise of shared prosperity for all Malaysians and still delivering on its promise of being inclusive and rewarding for all. All these are focused on three primary focus drivers: empowering Malaysians with digital skills, enabling digital-powered businesses, and driving digital investments. At the cusp of the 4IR, Malaysia is blessed with a chance to re-engineering the human experiment using technologies that decentralize authority and de-emphasize divisions along the lines of color, creed, and country, what the Japanese have coined as Society 5.0, and we have adapted as Malaysia 5.0. The term describes the next stage of the evolution of societal communities. The quest for Society 5.0 is built around the needs of a human-centered society. MDEC envisions playing a leading role in catalyzing this transition to Malaysia 5.0 as a new narrative for introducing emerging technologies which are essential tools in the new Malaysia 5.0 digital economy. With Malaysia 5.0, it can contribute to a more sustainable and secular economy where greater well-being is possible for all citizens regardless of age, ethnicity, and class. COVID-19 has accelerated the transition of society from physical infrastructures onto digital infrastructures and holds the promise to converge these environments together through the use of 4IR technologies such as artificial intelligence, AI, Internet of Things, IoT, blockchain, and fintech. After months of quarantine, with both companies and households in survival to recovery to restart mode, we are now emerging from crisis. The ensuing recovery relies largely upon a managed digital transformation. Malaysia 5.0 is a new narrative for Malaysia as an innovation economy that can compete in a disruptive technology world, serve as a springboard into ASEAN, a bridge between Asia, Middle East, and Africa, and interconnect with the 2.2 billion Muslim population worldwide. MDEC will no doubt play a leading role in introducing emerging technologies which are essential tools in the new Malaysia 5.0 digital economy. If such a policy is missing from our national strategy, Malaysia will be left behind and excluded from digital ecosystem and workforce. Instead, Malaysia 5.0 can contribute to a more sustainable and secular economy where greater well-being is possible for all citizens, regardless of age, ethnicity, and class. This is also part of our quest to make Malaysia as the heart of digital ASEAN.
Thank you, Dr. Rais Hussein. I think that the example, what you're doing in Malaysia can simply stand for an example, international example, how we can efficiently roll out a digital transformation strategy in a country. It's absolutely fantastic. Thank you. Now we welcome Mr. Micah Walker and his keynote speech. Mr. Micah Walker is the CEO of Graba Technologies. Graba, a global leader in secure and effective identification and data transformation for individuals, businesses, and organizations. Micah Walker has a diverse executive management background and international experience with global organizations. Micah understands the importance of adaptable leadership and the shift towards digital transformation. As organizations and countries pursue closer connection to the global networks, trusted technology can only empower the framework of organizational leadership and the system for operational education. Relationship with stakeholders that are empowered to be dynamic and intuitive are both relevant to today's workplace and prepare for our new normal, a rapid, constant change. As a growth specialized executive leader, Micah Walker has had the fortunate experience of leading a very diverse group of organizations through their journey in scaling up for growth. Some of the companies he has worked with include from a global coffee house business to an international fashion franchise, a listed corporate retailer to an expanding entrepreneurial technology brand. Mica's engaging management approach has been galvanized over 15 years of high-level executive accountability based on Asia, the Middle East, Australia, and in project management across many other global markets. The stage is yours, Mr. Walker.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, and welcome to everybody around the globe listening in. I'd also like to thank Dr. Hussain for the wise words and for his call out. And I believe on behalf of technology vendors and these emerging technologies that he speaks about, that we not only have an opportunity to bring these technologies to light, but we have a responsibility to do so during this crisis and to aid in the recovery and the bounce back. So what I would like to start with is, when I signed up for this event, I was attracted to the focus on trust. This Digital Week Online event speaks about the importance of trust inside of this unprecedented global event. And so in bringing ideas and shared strategies together, we can demystify the future in short, allowing education and understanding to match the rapid pace of technology innovation. And I firmly believe this is where technology and the rubber hitting the road on innovation. There are many, many companies who have come up with amazing technology innovations and have not been able to see them become adopted. And years later, when education and perhaps the interaction with our own mobile phone increases, once we can understand and be educated on those technologies, we will be more ideal to adopt them as users, as customers. So as a company that's executed technology solutions across more than 30 countries, and in the last 3 to 4 years, developed some extremely trusting relationships with government organizations, we feel particularly honored and responsible to be here today. So now this session is largely focused on reinventing cities, as Sebastian introduced. And earlier today, within the Digital Week Online framework, we heard from industry experts about how the fourth industrial revolution can drive digital transformation. We just heard from Dr. Hussain about AI, Internet of Things, fintech, and blockchain, and these being the 4 key trends and the key elements of the fourth industrial revolution. The grabber devices and the devices that our company manufactures and the software that we produce and the solutions that we deploy across the world, they touch all of those areas, all of those 4 areas. And so I'm looking forward to running through some of those in just a minute. So we can also see that trust is a big part of this. And I spoke of this at the very beginning around the theme. Part of the theme around this event is ideas and trusting those ideas. We can also see that trusting the authorities around us. So trusting the Malaysian Economic Authority, trusting those that lead our countries, trusting that those that lead our organizations, and even in a family sense, we are all leaders among the children and the siblings and the elderly around us. So trust and giving direction to each other and understanding the data that's around us is seriously important. So you'll hear me talk about a little bit of trust today, but first I wanted to introduce Grabber. So we've been building trust over 2 decades by a physical to digital transformation of data via travel companies, law enforcement agencies, and retailers. And COVID has only enhanced the digital transformation of cities, as obviously we try to stay connected via digital channels. And we are really seeing a shift from physical borders to digital borders. Sebastian talked about, regardless of creed, race, or religion, you can connect across borders. Dr. Hussain talked about being the digital hub and the leader in the digital ASEAN. It really does take only a few pioneers to break through till we have mass adoption. Recently, I heard from some artificial intelligence experts that yesterday's AI is simply today's mobile phone. And it'll be true for the Internet of Things and the blockchain innovations that we are hearing talked about this week at Digital Online. Today's innovation is really just tomorrow's technology. So just to take a quick step back before I get into some concepts that I want to introduce today, the UN reports that over 2 billion people have no valid form of identity. And this is a real problem in the world, which is accelerating during a crisis. The World Bank and a UN have created a 2030 initiative and a pledge to provide a valid form of identity for all human beings by that stage, which we believe will be close to 8 billion, if not closer to 9. Accessing healthcare, the right to vote, movement of people, even during a crisis or without a crisis, are all very, very significant challenges for many countries. And I, for one, having resided here in the UAE for some time now, and being a citizen of Australia, I feel privileged to have that passport and to reside in this country. The reality is out there that there are those less fortunate that have to move around and access healthcare. And we spoke about this before, what regulations and what frameworks need to change, what policies can be adopted in order to transform during this phase. And identity validation and having a valid form of identity that can be efficiently and securely validated anywhere a person lives, in a hospital, in a taxi, when they go to a bank or financial institution, even when they set up a business. These are all very, very important problems which Grabber addresses with its solutions. So this is sort of the global concept. Now, down to three things I want to present to you today. These are the facets of our discussion. It's around safety and security. We talked about safety and health being the two areas that this panel was called out to answer. And I've also talked about engagement and mobility. And so I want to first introduce the concept of a safe world. And it's the big priority of governments is that city leaders and nation leaders and province leaders, they want a safe and secure population. They want citizens to be safe and secure. These are the things that we focus on during a crisis or a battle or a time of financial decline. We focus on safety and security and health first, which are the most important things in life. And as governments also grapple with overpopulation or expanding populations and the demand that puts on infrastructure, we believe identity validation is part of the key to this solution. So we've deployed tens of thousands of devices across the world over the last couple of years alone. And I want to speak specifically to government agencies and particularly law enforcement, which is to speak to the safety and security example. So in North America, we have many thousands of devices deployed to the front line, allowing the efficient and accurate processing of identity validation. Things like driver's license, passport, your fingerprints, your iris can be captured and can be processed in a secure environment using government-protected privacy protocols, and can allow people to either go about their business, move from one port of entry into a country, or exit a country smoothly. And in times of crisis or where there are criminal insights to be gained, the Grabber then allows that officer to be able to efficiently and privately detect whether this person should be in this place at this particular time. We do move our products through to a fintech type of application, but I'm going to get to that a little bit later. So for us, it's around the flexibility to design a product and a solution that fits the needs of that government organization. And we see in the UAE here that we're a registered vendor and a trusted authority to the UAE government, to the Identity and Citizenship Authority. We produce many thousands of validations per day, millions per year, that allow people to purchase a SIM card or open a bank account or fund a loan. And as an integrator and as a bridge between the government's private and secure protocols and an innovative producer of these emerging technologies, we're really fortunate to be in that position of trust. But that's really the theme about safety, is if we really do trust each other, and that comes from collaboration, open communication, understanding each side of the coin, then we're able to move forward. Look, I think, one other thing I wanted to mention is that Dr. Hussain had brought up around this digital transformation is we actually deployed nearly 5,000 units to the Malaysian police several years ago. And so Grabber has actually been operating in these countries for some time. So sometimes I'm asked by other technology organizations how to come in, how to break through. I would say that the more we can understand the local market and the challenges like Dr. Hussain are going through, the more we can provide a solution tailored to their needs. And so speeding up government and city transformations for me is about listening. It's about learning. It's about engaging with that problem alongside the customer, in this case, which is the government organization. Then we can move fast together. So you often find when there's a misunderstanding amongst a conversation, relationally, organizationally, even at political levels, you often can't move very quickly at all. In fact, things usually decline when you don't have an understanding of each other's point of view. And so these would be the suggestions from a commercial CEO standpoint that I would make to policymakers and to regulators, is to allow a dialogue to happen, to present those views. So, moving slow in order to move fast, if you will, and having open communication at the beginning. So we then move to the second concept. I wanted to talk about an engaged world. So organizations want to engage, banks, retailers, telecommunications, airlines that are being so badly affected by this crisis. Hospitality, hotels, people that work in hotels, people that have been moved from one organization to another. It's all happening because of the closure and the limited access to these buildings and to these airports and to international travel routes. So if we're to speed up digital transformation and maybe even help prevent some of this decline next time, we really need to look at designing our products to obviously meet the need of those organizations. So for example, in the UAE, we have a telecommunications provider here that we deploy a point of sale solution to that comes in many forms. It comes in a wired form. It can come in a wireless form. It comes branded. We really aim to meet the needs of that particular customer. We help get people off cruise ships fast and efficiently. Obviously, security and safety is the most important thing. And we aim to bring a new dimension of that kind of customer empowerment through Grabber ID, our software product, which allows people to go mobile and open up a bank account from the safety of their own home, which is where I really want to go to now, which is the citizen priority. So I've talked about governments, I've talked about organizations. Now, what about us? We're human, and you'll see that my background is physical. This is a very real office I'm sitting in. There is no digital effect here. There is just a genuine, real person. I have 4 children, and my wife is looking after them about 20 minutes drive from here, and their safety and security is as important to me as really anything else we're talking about today. And so the technology that we have on our mobile phone is usually enabling us, but it can also cripple us if we don't manage it correctly. So I think what citizens and humans are actually looking for is a mobile interconnected world, one where they can take hold and ownership of their own identity. And that's the realm that we work in, is around the secure and the powerful validation of that identity. Here in the UAE government has taken a particularly long-term path to almost everything they do. They have a really big, ambitious vision around security, around events, around growing their nation, around digital advancements. Saudi is also extremely big in this region and taking the lead in digitization of their economy and their government organizations. And Grabber ID, which is a software product we have brought to market, allows a person to open up a bank account, go through the Know Your Customer or KYC protocols, allowing the bank to tick off its central bank regulations, allowing the government to have an established trust in what the bank is doing, and allowing the citizen, which is me, to have trust in the money that I'm about to transfer to another country or that I'm about to move between one of my accounts. And in the end, it's all about trusted technologies. This is a term that I think needs to fit within the 4IR framework. So I think the onset of Internet of Things has been great. Being able to order a loaf of bread and a bottle of milk from your fridge may seem like a great idea until you realize that opening up the chip that's inside of your fridge, it may listen, it may think for you, it may be gleaning information and insights from your language, which is built into artificial intelligence. That may be safe, that may be managed in a private and secure way, but we sometimes get a little scared. We first get excited and then we get a little scared. So what I would say again, and I would go back to this constantly, whether it's about IoT, whether it's about artificial or augmented intelligence, certainly around blockchain, where you have a decentralized transaction that happens from one person to another, trusting the person on the other end of that is going to be the key to unlocking the 4th industrial revolution. So these trusted technologies that we provide, either integrating some of the world's best data capture or inventing our own, we really see them being not as an expert, but almost as a student. We see us being as part of a global population of learning citizens that are coming together to solve really genuinely big problems. During COVID, we're seeing Bluetooth being used freely, unlike it's ever been used before because of contact tracing. We're seeing governments release applications that haven't even gone through the kind of user testing and the kind of user acceptance that we would normally like to see. We're seeing citizens more open and more willing to sign up for those kind of applications if it means I'm going to be safer, if it means I'm going to be more protected. And all of these things can be done and can be done relatively smoothly and easily, as long as I said, that we trust each other and we bring a collaborative approach. So I'll start to wrap up there around these 3 concepts of that 4th industrial revolution requiring trusted technologies. And we really must think of those 3 perspectives and those 3 major stakeholders around government, organizations, and then the actual citizen themselves. Open Business Council, Cities ABC, and Digital Week Online are speaking a lot about creating a framework and a directory to where those three different stakeholders can permit communication, can move freely. When we talk about blockchain, we talk about cryptocurrencies, all of these things are possible if those three stakeholders are meeting the needs. And we obviously need to trust the leaders in the authority, with the authority that they have as well. So Sebastian, I'm going to throw back to you to close off on this part of the discussion, and I really welcome being a part of the panel a little later.
We have really enjoyed your keynote speech, Mr. Walker. Thank you very much for this. I'm very happy that your company has an extremely strong focus on safety, on security, and on health. And this is absolutely important. On the other hand, I'm extremely unhappy from the fact, what I have heard, that 2 billion people in the world have no valid form of identity. This is absolutely crazy. I hope that our leaders will basically try to change this and then put this planet on the right track. I have a question. I would like to understand if your company, since we have this new COVID-19, has changed anything in the security access in the cities, or maybe I will express this in another way. If COVID-19 has changed anything in the security access in the cities, in order to avoid any new contaminations, because the fact is that wherever we go, we need to be identified either by the PIN code, by DI, by whatever. We are touching lots of different terminals. And so the question is, did you do anything in your company, maybe change your strategy, adjust your strategy to avoid, to touch basically all the basically different tools where the virus could be?
Yeah, great question. I think I'm drawn to an old saying that says that character is not built in adversity, but it is revealed by adversity. And, I take the corporate slogan of, strategy is revealed in adversity. Our strategies have always been to move to mobile only technologies. We already have access to and have creation of some touchless identification technology, Sebastian, which we're seeing a shift to people requesting less touch, less contact. One of the first things I saw happen when Dubai went into lockdown was, Domino's Pizza went to contactless. They just leave the pizza at the front gate of your community and you just go out and pick it up. So when you have technology as an infrastructure strength to begin with, you can actually move really, really quickly. And so we obviously were already going down that path, as I mentioned in my talk about touchless identification and identity on your phone. When I mentioned about the 2 billion people, there are a lot more people that have no valid form of identity than actually hold a mobile phone. I think it's close to 90% of the world's population now. It's unheard of. I've never heard of it being that high, that the world's population has mobile phones, even in the developing continents of South America, South Asia, and Africa. So people are holding in their hands a device that really could be the bridge to that change. Also, it's a safe and secure way, rather than having them travel for a long period of time to a bank or to a government organization, to be able to do these things in the comfort of your own home and the safety of your own home. That is a real shift. So being able to have a lifestyle, Sebastian, where you are based at home and working from home, and the psychology is all pointing towards get outdoors and enjoy outdoors, because, inside of your house is for, living, eating, and working. So we still need the outdoors. We still need to be out and about, but there are going to be controls, and those controls, I think, will be with us for some time. So the more that we can empower the mobile phone in our pocket in a safe and secure way, the better. And they're the trends that I'm seeing: a shift to people spending time at home and less traveling to, obviously less business travel, and less traveling to line up in a queue to perform a transaction. And the demand that's coming from citizens as well, Sebastian, is, hey, give me something that makes me safer and I will sign up for it. So we're seeing this with contact tracing. The applications that some governments have developed may not be being adopted as fast as the government wants it to be adopted. But I can tell you, any technology firm that had a creative product, had an innovative product that was being signed up many thousands of times per day would be very happy with this, would be very happy with that group. And so fortunately or unfortunately, we're sort of testing these applications and testing these digital technologies as they get developed in terms of tracing, in terms of access control. And so, yes, the regulations have changed. There is limited travel opportunities. Certain countries are completely banned. I myself had to go through a mandatory 14-day quarantine upon entering Australia recently. These are requirements, regardless of contracting the COVID virus or not, that you must go through. And we all must participate in that authority environment. And so the technology shifts that are happening is, for example, the hotel I was staying in had almost no internet available because of all of the people that were staying indoors. So this is an opportunity for telcos. Now that people aren't going to physical retail, to brick and mortar stores in the same volume they used to, this means that logistics and postal services are being overwhelmed with demand. And certain people that have found themselves, unfortunately, out of employment are now moving industries into different types of hospitality, domestic services, and logistics. So huge shifts are happening. It's affecting millions of people. And we also need to maintain a certain type of optimism. I mentioned this before to my fellow panelists. It's around being humble and recognizing that there's a lot of loss and it's a very tragic situation happening in the world. But also, we don't have to just sit here and speak about what's going wrong. We can sit here and suggest what may change and how we can all be a part of it.
Thank you, Micah. I think we are all happy to hear that your company is accelerating the change. It's absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much for your keynote speech. The next personality we welcome is Professor Kieran Fernandez. Thank you for joining our event, Professor Kieran. Professor Kieran Fernandez is the Associate Dean for Internationalization and Professor of Operations Management at the Durham University Business School. He's also the Executive Director of the Northern Powerhouse Innovation Observatory, Fellow of University College Durham and the Wolfson Research Institute. He has been appointed by the UK Secretary of State for International Development as a non-executive director of the UK National Commission for UNESCO, with a special responsibility for higher education. In 2017, he was elected Vice Chair of UKNC. He's Director of the Global Gateways Federation, among others. The stage is yours, Professor Kieran Fernandez. You are welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. And hello to all colleagues who are listening to this from around the world. I shall basically talk briefly on perhaps a very big question. And this was the question that was posed to me. And that was how to reinvent cities and nations in a time of COVID-19. I wish I had the answers to all of this question. Nevertheless, what I'll try to do is to give a sense of what I think can be achieved. As introduced by Sebastian, I'm from Durham University. And for those who probably don't know where we are, as you can see on my slides, the most common place you probably know of is where the red circle is, that's London. And if you see basically the green circle on the top is where Durham is. So we are at the border of England and Scotland. If you don't know much about Durham, it's fine. It's a very rich university with traditions. And if you don't know much about university, you probably know us from movies like Harry Potter. So if you've seen Harry Potter, you probably have seen Durham University somewhere. Nevertheless, what I want to talk about is specifically on the issue of how to reinvent cities and nations in the time of COVID. I'll probably use an example to illustrate what I am talking about from the region where I come from. So the region, as you can see in the map, is the darkened area on the top left, which is the northeast of England. Also in terms of the economic zone called the Northeast Local Enterprise Partnership. For colleagues from around the world, perhaps these numbers might not mean a lot. The population is about 2 million, with about 60,000 businesses that operate in that particular region. And the region is well known primarily for digital technologies, companies in the energy space, advanced manufacturing. So we have a number of large auto and general engineering companies based there, and health and life sciences, with some of the largest pharmaceutical companies having a center of excellence or research base in that part of the world. So how do you reinvent cities and nations or regions in a time of COVID-19? And I think there are three things that you need to do. The first thing is to understand your region. The second thing is to model your region. And then the third thing is to reinvent your region or the ecosystem. Now, when I use the term understand, what do I mean? Now, when you look at a region, you have a typical lens. For example, this is a lens which I have here, which looks at the UK from a rail perspective. Therefore, my lens or my view or my understanding of the region is this particular view. On the other hand, perhaps I'm a person very keen on cheese manufacturing. So if I look at the same map, or the same view, or the same region from a completely different lens, what I see is something very different. I see different types of cheese that are spread around the UK. Or perhaps I'm a person very interested in how the future of energy will look like. And the same map starts to look very different if I put on a hat from, for example, a solar energy perspective. Green meaning less options, and obviously red in this occasion meaning a lot of options. So when you start looking at a region or a city or a nation, you need to have a holistic perspective. You can't just have one view, either an economic view or a well-being view or a sustainability view or an education view, connectivity view, or any such view. What you really need to do is to have a view, these different maps that all fit into one another in a holistic sense. And I call this view as the ecosystem corridor. So if I use this ecosystem corridor view of the region which I talked to you about, the Northeast, which is one region, you could apply the same logic across other places. What you see is a very complex structure. A complex structure of companies, in our case, 60,000 or so. And the sort of questions that really need answering are, do you understand the companies and how these companies generate value in this corridor? Do you understand how global shifts happen and affect these companies? For example, we are all familiar with the big project called OBOR, or the One Belt, One Road project. What is the effect of this project, for example, on the manufacturing companies in this region? What is the urban versus rural working conditions? What is the effect of digital transformation? And we heard a few examples earlier on. Energy, resource, skills. So it's very crucial that you understand your region. And the reason why I highlight this is because the typical view of regions happens to be an economic view. It's rarely this multi-layered view of a region. Just to give an example, this happens to be a network of companies in our region. Now, one thing you will notice is when you connect these companies to one another, you start to see that these companies are not static, or the connections are not static. They change over a period of time. What this tells you is, in any system of this sort, if you look at any perspective, these are evolving systems. Regional networks, city networks, depending on which view you take, are evolving, and they're evolving constantly. And this makes it very difficult for policymakers to predict what is going to be the outcome of this complex behavior, of this complex networking. And one of the things which I would advise a lot of policymakers is, please do not use the proxy of economic activity. In the UK, we would call it as the standard industry classification, which classifies companies based on what you do. There would be equivalent terms in different parts of the world, NACE being the others, and so on and so forth. Using this has a lot of flaws, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time telling what they are. But the perspective of using the standard industry classification, companies with a standard code, code equates to the financial accounts of a company, and then this driving the entire engine of economy is probably the most flawed way to ever cut the cake. So that's not what I mean by understanding. Also, when you look at regional clusters, you will understand that there are companies that are collaborating, there are companies that are competing, and by looking at this different perspective, what you can start doing is increasing productivity by reducing unexpected bottleneck in innovation. You can start understanding the homogeneity and the heterogeneity of your supply chain, of your companies, and you can develop appropriate mechanisms. Not all companies are the same. Therefore, the answer is, why do you have the same policy? Companies are different, they behave different, therefore you need differential policies for different companies. It also reveals how poorly some companies are connected to this information innovation gateway. And you can see in this example, in one supply chain of companies, of a large company, there are so many companies that are at the boundaries, at the periphery of this. You need to bring them into it. By not doing it, you are increasing things like security, authenticity, and colleagues have talked about blockchain as one mechanism in the past. This is one company, and you can see how rich, how complex the clusters are, how they're connected. But you also have things that are not connected. So the first thing, like I said, is understand and model your innovation corridor. Now, this is happening. For example, Singapore has several very good examples of creating digital twins of the entire city, trying to model semantics on all sorts of issues, including vaccination and so on and so forth. So this is possible. And then the third thing is about reinventing. I think there are 4 mechanisms you need for a region. The first thing is the sensing mechanism. You need at a city, at a region, at a national level, a mechanism to sense on what's going on. And for example, the one mechanism we use in the Northeast is the Innovation Observatory, which Sebastian talked about. We observe how innovation takes place in a region, just like how you would be observing things in the sky if you were an astronomer. We then have a number of platforms to innovate. We have incubation for projects. This is different to incubators that incubate companies. This is project incubation, where you have universities, your policymakers, and your industry all collaborating with one another in a triple helix format. And then finally, a mechanism to help companies survive and grow. Sense, innovate, incubate, survive. And this cycle goes on through different policy mechanisms. So in a nutshell, to answer the question, how to reinvent cities and nations in a time of COVID, there are 3 things you need. You need to understand the ecosystem, and this cannot be just an economic view. You need to model this, and then you need to reinvent your ecosystem to understand how you can survive and grow in this ecosystem. And not 2 ecosystems are the same. So this has to take a very regional focus, because the ecosystem in Northeast of England is different to the Midlands, is different to the Southeast, is different to other parts of the world, and this needs to be taken on board. On which note, I shall stop. It's my 10 minutes, and we can perhaps continue and have further dialogue.
Thank you very much, Professor Kiran Fernandez. So we have, I think, perfectly understood. You can eventually give me the hand so I can share the screen. We have understood perfectly the importance of modeling the innovation corridor. I mean, starting also by improving the poor connections that we are having in the cities. We understand that it's extremely important also to understand exactly how our regions are performing, how our regions are working, and how the complex structure are being performing. It's absolutely key. I would say at this stage also, you mentioned that it's very important to observe how the innovation is taking place in order to be able to build up on this, to leverage on this, to make people aware of the needs to change especially the poor connections, the infrastructure, and to take the overall thing to the next level. Thank you again, Professor Kiran Fernandez. We have the pleasure now to welcome Mr. Antonio Santos.
Hi.
Mr. Antonio Santos is an influencer, global tech ambassador, and social media business evangelist. He currently holds the position of community manager at Atos, one of the biggest French and international companies. Trained as a sociologist, Antonio Santos has been working with the likes of Siemens and Talent Culture as a serial entrepreneur. He has co-founded 6 startups. Antonio is involved in projects related to digital transformation, future of work, diversity, and inclusion focused on sustainability. Mr. Santos, the stage is yours. Please share with us your knowledge and your experience. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I'm also a member of a group called Valuable 500, and we're trying to create a kind of a Fortune 500 to engage on support of people with individuals with disabilities, where organizations commit themselves at the board level to support individuals who have a disability. And this is particularly important in the context of cities when we are rethinking the way how we build them. Suddenly, and for a very long time, huge populations are coming face to face with the feeling of exclusion from normal life and sense of isolation as individuals with virus, or we have to stay at home to protect ourselves. But for many people, this sense of isolation and detachment from normal life isn't a temporary phase. They aren't waiting out the lockdown for normality to resume. For a large percentage of our population, including elderly and many of the 1 to 3 billion people living with a disability worldwide, this is their daily experience of isolation and exclusion. So this is the norm for them. So it's particularly important for us to, in the time that we are living, to recognize that a huge number of population has lived in this form of isolation for many years, and this is how they live. So when we look at the way how we rethink cities, it's particularly important to make sure that we build inclusive cities that are inclusive for people with disabilities and for the elderly population who is growing in many parts of the world, in Japan, in Germany, in Portugal, in Italy, in Canada. So when we are developing solutions, when we are redefining the role of the city, it's particularly important that we can listen to these populations from early stage. So when at the university level, at the city council level, at the level of architecture and technology, it's particularly important that people with disabilities are part of the design process, that they are there to be listened in order to help the design of new cities with the risk of developing solutions that don't work for them. Now, over the last year, I have the opportunity to be present at some of the most important events around the world, focus on technology in many parts of the world, from Asia, United States, and Europe. And often, when we talk about cities, the term smart cities comes to everyone's narrative and presentation. But today, we still have a conversation on smart cities that is pretty much focused on the technology side, about sensors, cybersecurity. The technology is so overwhelming that we need to bring all of these technologies to create a city that is smart. I feel that it's particularly important to focus more on the individual, those who are living in the city and outside the city. That conversation around the person is more important than technology itself, because it's going to be the destination of all the technology that we are going to build. So my contribution on this panel is in that space. If we are reinventing the city, we need to make sure that cities are sustainable and are inclusive, that families can have a good experience within the city, that cities are secure to everyone, that when we travel or when we have times of leisure, that infrastructure can be enjoyed by a 5-year-old or a 95-year-old person. It's particularly important that we are able to create this kind of bridges within the city space, because it's also an opportunity for business. So as we all know, with COVID and with everyone staying at home, we were suddenly forced to use online shopping. For many people, this was something that we're not doing on a regular basis. And we see a huge growth of people older than 50 and 65 to start to using online shopping. And many of the websites, they were not ready for them as consumers. They were not able to push a button. Sites were too complicated. So the digital economy was not ready to face the challenge of having elderly and people with disabilities to purchase online. So they were facing huge difficulties just to do something simple as buy bread or milk, because the sites were not ready. And this sense also applies to future cities and the way how we build them. We need to make sure that from a perspective of architecture, a perspective of design, a perspective of digital cities, we consider the needs of these individuals when they navigate in the city, when they use the public transport, when they walk in the city, when they go to a hotel, when they go to a pub, when they go to an airport. It's particularly important to consider them. And as an example, there's a system that was created in Scotland by Gavin Neate, an application called the Welcome app, where businesses are able to use this app within the city, within the airport. So an individual with a disability is able to book time on this app, and then the business will be informed, oh, there's an individual with someone in a wheelchair who is coming to your business tomorrow. And then the business is able to make themselves ready to receive that person. If someone, if that said person needs to travel to an airport or needs to go to the city council, that person is able to book time. So the airport or the city council, they know that that person is coming, and they are able to make themselves ready to receive that person where they are. But the same applies if a person with disability is going to a job interview. They can also use the app to notify the business that they are going to have that job interview, that they are coming. So when they are at the place, they are welcome, and they are providing with all the accommodation that they need in order to have the service. So I think I would like to resume my presentation here and my communication by calling the attention that we need to create cities that are inclusive for everyone. And in order to do that, we need to listen those who are in need, in order to make sure that we don't exclude people by default when we are redesigning cities, and when we are investing huge amounts of public and private money to redesign the cities. So it's particularly important that to make those cities sustainable, that we include those individuals from the moment that we start building something.
Thank you, Antonio. You are, in the conclusion, bringing the humanity into the technology on one hand, and you are bringing back the humanity into the cities. Cities are not only smart, they are human, and it's absolutely important. Thank you, all the speakers. You came with lots of innovative ideas. I would say now we need to move to the execution phase and make these cities and these nations working in a more efficient way. We heard lots of insight. We need maybe leadership in some spaces. We also need financing. So I hope that this panel and this conference will be heard by the leaders who are able to bring the financials on the table to enable us, cities, nations, to take, as you mentioned, Antonio, the problem of disability to the next level, and let our disabled friends, families, to be able to operate in a more normal way, I would say, in this not only COVID-19 days, but in general. Thank you all. It was highly appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
We have finished the live stream. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll send you the link and so on.
Thank you.
Thank you.